Welcome, welcome. So in this video, we're going to be doing a fun exercise. We'll be ranking protein sources on this sort of style. Let's make me bigger here because I'm important. Of kind of this S tier through D tier. If you followed some YouTube content creators, I've seen this with like candy bars. I've seen this with office chairs, a bit of everything. So that'd be a fun way to categorize different types of protein. And I blew up sort of this criteria as well over here on the right side to kind of say, okay, how am I classifying these things as S tier and kind of as they get worse and worse as a means to reach your protein intake. So let's start over here on my right side of my screen. So the first thing we'll be looking at here is this protein bioavailability. This is not a science lecture. Really, you can think about this as all protein is not created equal, meaning if you got 10 grams of protein from your Honey Nut Cheerios, that will not have the same effect on recovery, on muscle building as 10 grams of protein from, say, tilapia. It's a little bit different. If you're aware, there's some complete proteins, incomplete proteins. Some are missing these things called amino acids that make that effect differently. This isn't usually a big deal in practice because no one is reaching a high protein diet through eating brown rice, breads, and peanut butter anyways, but that can be a way you compare sort of these different classes, okay? The second thing, more importantly, will be like a protein to fat ratio. The way to think about this is how much fat has to come along for the ride for you to get a certain amount of protein. Let's take, for example, something like egg whites. You can get 20 grams of protein and get 0 grams of fat. There is no fat in egg whites. Then we compare something like a ribeye steak. Maybe in order to get 20 grams of protein, you may need to get 20 grams of fat just in order to get that because it's built into the meat, right? So of course, the higher the fat content, the lower it will rank on this list. And then similar, but the overall satiety effect. So some more plant-based or grain-based proteins, something like oatmeal, while it's not very high in the actual protein, it will give you some sort of accessory protein and it will promote some good fullness. Beans are another good example of this. Decently high in protein. It's not going to, again, make 150 grams of protein an easy feat with just oatmeal and beans, but they do promote satiety, which if your goal is to eat a high protein diet, and also have your calories controlled, which is most people's goals, it is nice to have sort of that duality effect of fullness and get some extra protein there, okay? So let's now run through the list. Again, this is not scientific. This was pretty just a fun exercise, but it will kind of help, I think, make sense of better and worse protein options, again, as a way to reach your protein goal and also do it in a way that's efficient so you don't eat a whole bunch of calories in order to get that. So let's start here with S tier. This, of course, would be the best possible class you could be in. Egg whites, 99.1, so almost no fat. Ground turkey. Of course, there are other cuts, but it would be 99.1 ground turkey. I think there may be 99.1 ground chicken as well. Similar macronutrient profile. We have fat-free Greek yogurt. We have whey or casein protein powder. That will kind of depend upon the brand, but more often than not, it's going to have just a couple of grams of fat, a couple of grams of carbs. Boneless, skinless chicken breast, the staple of a healthy diet, and then a whole bunch of fish options, tilapia, tuna, shrimp. You could put in another, cod probably fits into here. A lot of different fish, but you get the idea, like a white fish will work very, very well in this S tier. So in order to reach this S tier, really the things that we need are all of this. They have to be complete proteins. They have to almost have no fat. And then by definition, they will promote fullness quite high. So if you're ever in a situation where you don't have a lot of calories remaining, say you're trying to eat 2,500 calories per day, but you've already eaten 2,300, you don't have a lot of wiggle room, but you still need to reach your protein intake. These things are fantastic, right? You almost get all of your calories come from protein. Now, let's move into A tier. This is still very, very good, by the way. You don't have to eat S tier foods, breakfast, lunch, and dinner to be successful. So now we have some fattier cuts of meat here. 93.7 ground beef, same thing, ground turkey. Reason why I put beef jerky here, expensive, even though it's not on my criteria, and it's not going to be as filling because it's dehydrated, so the density of that it's a lot more dense than say something like beef, which is bigger. The bigger a food is per calorie, the more filling it will be. Low fat cottage cheese, salmon, a little bit higher in fat than some of these other fish. Chicken thighs, similar thing, a little bit higher in fat than chicken breast, but still great. Pork tenderloin, and then also I put in a different sort of plant-based protein powder in here. The reason why this is a little bit worse than whey or casein, if you look online, these will often be higher in fat and carbohydrate. So again, this protein to other ratio is not as favorable because they have to put more in it for kind of taste and the thickness of that product. Okay. Now, moving to B tier here. This is now where they start to have a little bit more fat, significantly more fat, I would say, than this S and A tier. Okay. Whole eggs, obviously great protein there, but there's 5 grams of fat per egg, right? So that can add up pretty quickly. If you're having 3 or 4 whole eggs, adds up quickly. Deli meat, there's maybe a little bit of controversy with nitrates and the process and the sodium. So the protein is good. It may even have an A tier macronutrient breakdown. But again, if you can swing it, I'd prefer not to have that as like a daily staple. Chicken and turkey sausage for breakfast. Again, a little bit of fat, but still great. 2% milk or less. Again, skim milk. You could probably argue is even an A tier. There's some carbohydrates in there though. So even though the fat is low, there are some extra calories there. Mozzarella cheese, similar. Sirloin steak and other sort of leaner steaks like that fit into this B tier. Turkey bacon, and then also tofu. So still fantastic options. These not the biggest difference I would say here between like an A and a B tier. These will probably not be like the staple of a meal every single time. You're probably not going to center your breakfast around just whole eggs or your lunch just around deli meat. These may kind of be accessory things. We have some chicken sausage with our eggs and egg whites. We have some turkey bacon, the same thing. We have mozzarella cheese as a snack, right? These will kind of fill in some holes, but likely not be kind of the offensive lineman, if you will, of your high protein diet, all right? Now, we get into the not so great options here, C and D tier, okay? These will be an appreciable amount of fat or additional calories. And again, at this point, I would think of C and D tier as really not foods you should be eating for the protein content. Protein will come along a little bit, but you're gonna have to get so much additional calories there. It's really inefficient to get them this way. Okay, this would be ribeye steak, super fatty. Fried chicken, obviously super fatty. Black beans, maybe you could argue this is a B tier. Again, they are quite filling, similar to oatmeal. Not a lot of protein there, but it will be more filling. Cheddar cheese, a bit higher in fat than mozzarella cheese, and then also whole milk, decent amount of fat, and then the carbohydrates that come with any sort of dairy milk to come along with it. So again, if you're having some oatmeal and it gives you 5 grams of protein extra for breakfast, that's some gravy on top of the meal. But of course, you're not going to have a high protein breakfast with oatmeal being the centerpiece of that. Okay. And lastly here, D tier, broccoli, brown rice, breads, cereal, bacon, nuts and nuts butter. These are things that are either so low in protein that there's really going to be almost no way you get any sort of even extra credit from them. Like I think there's 2 grams of protein in half a cup of brown rice. I mean, 2 grams of protein is equivalent to nothing, right? And then in some of these cases here, like bacon, and in particular nuts and nuts butter, I'm not sure how this theme got tossed around in nutrition circles, but it's very common, I would say, for people to be like, oh, have a peanut butter and jelly before you go to bed for high protein. And if you look at it, I believe like a peanut butter, like a standard peanut butter, like 20% of the calories come from protein. It is not a high protein item whatsoever. 80% of what you're getting does not come from protein. So it's quite obvious to see it's not an efficient way to get that. Is there some protein in there? Sure. But there's some protein about anything that you eat. You could have, more protein probably having one bite of a chicken breast than you would by having a whole peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So you'd be better off just not doing this and having a bite of chicken if your real goal is to have high protein. But that's the video. I wanted to keep this pretty short and sweet. But again, as a consumer of this, whether you're a client or just a passive user of sort of our content, the way I would look at this, right, you're really looking at centering your meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner around these S and A tier options. You look at those meals, you should have something like this in each of them. Again, this B tier may kind of be an accessory piece to one of these meals, or it's kind of an easy snack. Again, maybe use a 2% milk with your whey protein to kind of get some extra protein there, but probably not going to be, again, really carrying the team there. C tier, this is like, okay, it's some extra credit. Yes, there's some protein there, but it's not going to really move the needle. Again, slightly worse than B tier, just less protein overall in these things. And then D tier, these are things that are just not going to ever have enough protein for it to promote a high protein diet. And again, some of these cases like the bacon and the nut butters, you will just probably consume too many calories in order to get that protein if you aim to do it there. So again, these are inefficient ways to accomplish it. Surely you're not going to have a high calorie diet eating too much broccoli and brown rice. But if you're like, oh, I want to have 20 grams of protein in the snack, let me have a whole bunch of peanut butter, you forget that it took you, again, 400 calories to get that. If you're 19 and trying to put on some muscle, that may be fine. But if you're trying to control your calories in any capacity, it's even more important to stick in this sort of S and A tier. So that is the video. Thank you for watching, and until next time.